Okay, the last time I had this discussion, it was about a tanker called the Zephyrus, and that was, it did arrive in Kwinana with oil that had originated from Russia via India, which is the way that the current loophole allows it to happen. There have been attempts to try and close this loophole, to try and stop the flow of Russian oil, which comes to Australia, goes into our supply chain, and of course the money goes back to Russia to help its war efforts against Ukraine. So it's a pretty serious issue. The Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, spoke about it and put out a press release not long ago. As I said, the last time was Zephyrus. That was in August. Now, we understand there is another tanker on its way. Mark Corrigan is a chemical engineer, and he's been researching and certainly campaigning to try and stop this Russian oil trade. And he joins me now. G'day, Mark.
Hi, Gary. I was hoping we wouldn't have to talk about this again.
Well, there you go. Look, just tell us what you know about this particular tanker that's on its way. It's called the Torm Emil or Mealy.
Emily, I think it is.
Emily.
Yeah.
That makes it easier for me to say. The Torm Emily. What do you know about it?
So the Torm Emily is a Danish flag vessel. It's midway through the Indian Ocean at the minute, carrying 69,000 tonnes of diesel from Mangalore refinery to BP Kwinana again. And BP Kwinana is one of the main Australian buyers of fuel from Mangalore.
Okay. Well, what makes you sure that this would be Russian diesel?
Well, last year, Mangalore refinery was using about 40% Russian in its feed. They've dropped back since all the recent flurry of threats from the US. Now I believe it's around 20% in the last month. That's from our friends, the Centre for Research into Energy and Clean Air in Europe. They put together the figures of 20% for September.
Right. Okay. So the point you're making is that there's a very real possibility, if not a definite one, that
it's definite.
Yeah. Okay. That this oil has been processed in India and then it makes its way to Australia. Now, we know that the federal government, they came out and talked about lowering the Russian oil price cap, imposing sanctions on 95 Russian shadow fleet vessels to try and sort of stem the flow. What more can they do or should they be doing?
Well, they should be following the lead of the EU and placing sanctions on third country refining. The EU are doing that from January in 2026, and Australia has to follow suit. Otherwise, we are going to become the dumping ground of the blood oil from Russia.
Okay. Why don't you think the government want to do that? Is it because they'd upset relations with India? I mean, certainly Donald Trump wasn't too bothered about that when he slapped on those sanctions and the tariffs.
I think it's they're concerned about a relationship with India and concerned about patching up the difficulties that we've had with China. And India and China are the biggest buyers of Russian oil. And this is my guess, I don't know, but I would imagine that Minister Wong is hoping that India will respond to the threats of the US and not have to actually bring in our own updated regulations. It's much easier to do it that way, but I don't like our chances. India is making all the noises at the minute that they're going to keep buying Russian. And if the EU closes the gate on their supply from third country refiners, and Australia isn't imposing any restrictions, well, it's likely to come this way.
I'm talking to Mark Corrigan, who's a chemical engineer in his own right. He's also a researcher and a campaigner against the Russian oil trade. I note that you've written a letter to Resources Minister Madeleine King. If it helps you, she'll be on this program tomorrow speaking with me. What would you like to say to the Resources Minister?
Well, she offered some positive words when the last tanker came in that we were talking about, the Zephyrus, saying that this loophole needed to be closed. And we've had the announcement that there's an increase in sanctioning of tankers, but that really is meaningless in Australia's context. So Australia needs to close that third-party country gate.
Right. Well, just explain that, though, because I know that when the Foreign Minister put out that statement, it was, we take further action against Russian oil revenue, and she says that these are sanctions targeting 95 Russian shadow fleet vessels. For those that aren't aware of that, what are those shadow fleet vessels, and why don't you think that makes a difference?
So the shadow fleet vessels are the ones that well, previously Iran, or still Iran, but also now Russia, are using that dodge a lot of the normal constraints of insurance and flagging. They're flagged by countries like, no offence to these countries, but Gabon and Guinea-Bissau and Marshall Islands, who make a lot of money out of providing flags to these vessels. But these vessels are inadequately insured, and if an accident happens, it's going to be potentially an unfunded accident. Now, why I say it's meaningless is because only, as far as I can find, 2 or 3 of these vessels had actually been to Australia before the imposition of the sanctions. And when they were in Australia, they were doing an innocuous route. They were actually taking, I think, oil from Exmouth to a port receiving our product, not acting as import vessels of dodgy product. So we now sanction 155 vessels, and that's a fraction of what the Europeans and the UK are doing.
Right.
So it doesn't make any difference.
Okay. I note that this one, the Torm Emily, Danish, isn't it? Got a Danish flag. Does that surprise you?
Absolutely nothing wrong with its flagging, reputable. But if you follow what the Torm Emily has been doing, it's been satisfying all the laws. It hasn't been taking product from Russia. But in the last 5 months, it's this is, I think it's interesting, but starting off from Mangalore Refinery, it took a load over to the UK, dropped off a load in the UK, then went over to Texas, picked up a load, took a load of Texan fuel, which is not Russian, to Korea. So that's all legitimate, but then picked up a load at the end of the pipeline that accepts Russian crude in northeast China. This is the Siberian pipeline that has a little arm that goes off to northeast China.
Yep.
And those refineries up there, like Dalian Refinery, are well known as Russian oil consumers. That was taken then down to a Singapore terminal, which Australia imports from.
Right.
Who knows whether that fuel went into the Australian market. Then after dropping off at the Singapore terminal, which is actually German-owned, so it's such a multinational business that we're dealing with, it went across to Mangalore Refinery again, which has Russian fuel going into it, Russian crude oil, and now it's on its way to Kwinana. So we can't escape this world trade unless we impose the regulations that the EU is imposing. All
right. Well, I'll be asking the Resources Minister perhaps on your behalf, and of course all those people that are from Ukraine living in Australia wondering how this can be allowed to happen as well. I'll do that tomorrow when she joins me.
Can I add one more point?
Yep.
when Senator Payman from Western Australia, Senator,
yes,
she's a senator, she asked Minister Wong a few questions in Parliament when the Zephyrus came in, and Minister Wong responded saying that we had imposed strict sanctions about importing Russian crude into the country that stopped $80 million of crude. Now, what's happening with the trade now, $80 million pales into insignificance. We're talking about billions of funding going back to Russia.
But not just in the oil that makes it to Australia. You mean around the world? In the
refined oil via these third-party refiners.
Okay.
So when Penny Wong was talking about the 80 million, she was talking about direct crude imports that we were sanctioning from Russia. They stopped immediately. But now the Russian oil that's going through these third-party refiners leaves that in the dust.
All right. Well, look, thanks very much for bringing it to our attention. We'll certainly put some questions to the federal government when we speak to the Minister tomorrow.
Good talking to you, Gary.
Good on you, Mark Corrigan there, who's does a fair bit of work looking into where all this Russian oil is getting moved around the world and how it could possibly be ending up here in Australia, but it is. And I'm not saying you, the consumer, have any power to do anything about it, because you don't know when you go to a Bowser at any sort of service station, perhaps, where the source is. You can't really know that. But certainly the government have the ability to do more about where it's being refined. You've seen the US government have certainly stepped up and put sanctions on the Indian refineries. Will Australia do the same? We'll find out. I'll ask the question tomorrow. Hey, last question from me. I know you've got a busy day. Can I just ask you whether you've got any view on the state government being able to intervene at all when a tanker arrives in Kwinana in coming days carrying Russian oil?
Look, I haven't seen the details in relation to that particular story, Gary, but obviously we want to make sure that any products that come to Western Australia do not support autocratic regimes such as the Russian government at the moment. I think everyone's appalled with the conflict in the Ukraine. Now, whether we have the ability to reject a shipment, I'm sure this is primarily in the realm of the federal government. I'd be surprised if it's coming, but disappointed also.
All right. Well, we know that the Federal Resources Minister might be across it, so we'll ask her tomorrow.